This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today is an Ohio University graduate, actually, and I didn't even know that until we just were talking a little bit before the program. Her name is Dijana Muminovic, hopefully, I'm saying it correctly, and she is from Bosnia, but she is a graduate of Ohio University. When were you here, Dijana?
I was here from 2012 until 2014.
Okay, so 2 years.
Yes.
And your field of study?
Viscom, photojournalism.
Photojournalism, okay. Well, then you know Athens pretty well, and actually the first time we met was last Thursday when you were a speaker on campus.
Yes.
Were you here for something special?
Well, I came straight from Bosnia. I first went to Pennsylvania. I was invited for a conference to share my work on the recent migrant crisis.
Oh, yes.
And then I was invited here at OU to speak about my personal experiences and the work that I've been doing over in Croatia.
In Croatia?
Yes.
So Croatia is your current home?
No, Croatia is a neighboring country. So I am from Bosnia, but we spoke a little bit about this earlier. It's a former Yugoslavia. So the countries that were together way before I was even born sort of split apart, and they divided. So now we have individual countries that were part of Yugoslavia.
I see.
And now,
yes.
But since the refugees were passing through Croatia, which is literally, on the border with Bosnia, and it feels, it's like they're in my homeland.
Right.
So I had to go and, document.
Yes. Well, we have the map up showing, now Bosnia is the green part, I believe, isn't
Yes,
it?
the one in the middle.
The one in the middle, the green one. And then Croatia is to its north and west, the yellow bit.
Yes.
Actually, it sort of looks like it kind of goes around Bosnia. It takes most of the seacoast, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It takes the coast. And then it sort of hugs Bosnia, see?
Yes, it does. And then to the east, the pink is Serbia.
Serbia, yes.
Yes. But then there are other parts also of the former Yugoslavia, which meant Pan-Slav, all the Slavs together.
Right.
Which I remember from the Second World War, Yugoslavia, and the former dictator there, Tito.
Wow,
who put them all together, so to speak, and fought the Germans and the Italians and so on, and united all of the different ethnic groups, really. I'm not sure.
This is correct.
Maybe based on religion partly, isn't it? Based somewhat on religion. The Croatians are mostly Roman Catholic.
Right.
The Serbs are mostly Orthodox Christians.
Correct.
And then in Bosnia, they had some of all three, including mostly, though, the plurality, not the majority, but the plurality of people were Muslim.
This is correct, but it's also correct that in Bosnia, more so than in the other former countries, we have a larger number of, different religious, groups. And we actually have more than just three that you've just mentioned. And that's one part that I like about Bosnia the most.
Yes.
It's, even though you can still feel amongst, people a little bit of, tension, but there are also the people and other generations who appreciate the diversity that we do
Yes,
have.
right.
So it's nice.
Yes, my husband took quite a study of it in the 90s when the war was going on, and so he remembers, statistics like 44% Muslim, I don't know, 31%, I guess that maybe was the Serbs, and 17% Croats, and
Right.
or something along that line.
And then it all dropped, after the war.
Yeah, there was
So-
a civil war. Serbia was aiding the Serbian Bosniaks, and Croatia was aiding the Croatian Bosniaks, and poor Muslim Bosniaks were the ones who were really caught. In is Sarajevo a part of the...
Yes, Sarajevo is currently the capital of Bosnia, and it's the city that was under the siege during the war, so it suffered quite a lot.
Right.
So
Do you personally remember the war?
I do. I remember it from the day one until it actually ended.
Ah, well, you must have been 9 or 10 or something like that.
I was exactly 9 years old, and I remember I was in my backyard just picking flowers, and I was in my own world, and I heard sirens going off, and I was thinking it was the anniversary for Tito, because sometimes they would play,
He was dead by then.
Right, but then, I thought, the dates didn't really match. Something was strange. And then I heard the first explosion.
Oh my,
And so
very scary for a 9-year-old.
yes. And since then, I remember the first year was the worst, because that's the year when the airplanes were, flying above. You didn't know who they were going to attack, where they're going to throw the bombs at. So most of my childhood was spent down in the basement.
Your
And
own personal bomb shelter.
yes.
Dear. But this
And-
was in Sarajevo itself?
No, this is just an hour away.
I see.
Zenica.
Ah, okay.
You might have
Nearby.
heard.
Uh-huh.
Yes, nearby. My closest cousin, she is from Sarajevo, and I remember, that was the end of, me going and visiting her
Oh, right.
for the summer, and
Even though she was so close by.
right, because their town was completely,
Yeah.
they were the target, so.
That's war is really terrible. You know.
It is, and it's kind of strange. People don't know, but we have at least 10 more conflicts or wars going on currently in the
Yes.
world.
Yes. And especially so many refugees from Syria and other Middle Eastern countries.
Right, and I've gotten to know so many families, by documenting the Syrian refugees or people from Middle East. And the ones escaping from Syria, they actually knew of Bosnia, and it's because of the war. And they were all welcoming me. I had no issues, documenting them and,
right.
getting access. They sort of looked at me as someone who wouldn't, harm them or just take them for granted.
So this is what your photojournalism focuses on, right?
Yes, I think personally I felt the need to both see so many refugees passing, through the neighboring country, but also to document their lives, because I felt that these are the lives of so many people, from the past, including
Yes.
myself, and
Right.
so.
So that's what your photojournalism, what you were speaking about and showing on Thursday last there. Although I must say it was kind of unfortunate. This is the poster, which shows Dijana's name and shows one of the pictures that she took. So these are in color, so I assume that these are Syrian refugees?
Okay, so the images and photos are, yes, Syrian refugees, but what I did, I compared these images with some in black and white that come from a friend of mine who documented the Bosnian War, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a girl, of course, I was not part of
a little girl. A little girl, in fact.
Yes.
But these are current refugees.
Yes. Just to, you know, show it's not that different, you know. Look, I mean.
Right. This black and white photo is something that your friend photographed 20 years ago,
yes,
probably.
And these are the Bosnian refugees, you know, leaving. And here is another one of the thousands of Middle Eastern refugees leaving through Croatia.
Uh-huh.
And again, this is an
from
image.
the 1990s.
Right.
Yes. Right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you and your experiences. Obviously, you were growing up in wartime, unfortunately, in the 1990s. And were you a refugee yourself? I mean, did you have to leave your town?
I didn't have to leave my town because my town wasn't the target during the war. So actually, a lot of the images in black and white that we just saw, many people from surrounding towns or villages, they were escaping and coming into my hometown.
Ah, I see.
So we turned my school and many other schools into shelters for them. And I remember this because my brothers, they remind me, and you know, they ask me, hey, remember when we had to do our homework down in the basement?
Yeah. Not so good, but at least safe from bombs.
It's safe, but then it just reminds you that why didn't we go to school? Oh, because, you know, there were people that we offered our schools to. But then again, why were we doing homework in the first place?
Well, trying to keep up, which is very difficult, of course, when lives are different.
Right.
You know, I was about your same age, maybe a little older, during the Second World War. And I was born in 1932, so I was 9 years old exactly when Pearl Harbor was struck by the Japanese and our country entered the Second World War, which had already been going on for several years, you know, in Europe, and Hitler had overrun continental Europe, much of Western continental Europe at that time, and the English were just sort of holding on by their fingernails. And then in 1941, before the U.S. entered the war, Hitler attacked the Soviet Union in June of 1941. So then the Soviet, Russians, and the English got together, and after the Japan attacked us, then the U.S. entered the war too. So, and I lived during the Second World War in near a military base in the United States.
Oh, really?
Where they were making ammunition for the war effort. So, you know, we were children who were living in hastily thrown up housing that was housing all these people who came to make ammunition out in the Nevada desert. Probably put there, you know, so in case there was an accident, wouldn't blow up a whole bunch of people, you know, only the ones who were there. Luckily, we never had any serious accidents like that. But it was always kind of in the background there, and we would see the Marines. They would patrol on horseback, through our streets. And of course the children were interested in the horses and all that sort of thing. So in a way I experienced a bit of the war effort,
Right.
but quite safely.
Well, that's good, but it's also interesting that you know, sort of always remember it.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, I remember it very well. And so I'm sure you remember, you know, and the fact that your school was there another place where you could meet, or did teachers come out and around, or were your parents expected to?
No, not really. It was homework, you know, we would do homework for 6 months and then we would try to go to school, and I think eventually they ended up canceling, you know, classes, and then we just, when war ended, we continued going to a class that we were supposed to go to. Like they didn't make us, you know, go back and retake, you know. At least in my hometown, that's how it was. So.
But that was interesting that you were actually a refugee haven, your town was. Mention its name again.
Zenica, and actually you won't believe, but since the Syrian refugees have been passing through Croatia, there have been talks that they would eventually come to Bosnia. So the whole, you know, the whole time we were expecting them to be coming, and the places that we used for refugees during the Bosnian War in my hometown, we instantly made it available and ready in case. So they're actually still set up, and you know, just in case.
Just in case.
Right.
But they're not mostly coming through
They're
your
not.
town.
See, the economy is so bad in my country, even.
Yes.
Everyone is escaping.
They're trying to get to a place where it'd be more easy to get a job, I suppose. Yeah. Well, that's one of the difficulties, isn't it? And then there are these questions too. How many are, quote, bona fide refugees, and how many are economic refugees, you know, that are just trying to get a better place, but are not from Syria itself.
Right, and I wouldn't be able to tell. But I can tell you a few scenes, you know, from the refugee camp over in Croatia. People were constantly fighting with each other because there were the people escaping the economy and people escaping the war. So the ones that were escaping the war felt privileged to get on buses, to be the first ones to get on buses and then leave and go to their next destination. But we, like the people, you know, in these shelters or in these refugee camps, they don't know who is who and who is from Syria and who is not, because they don't have documents.
Right.
But they know, you know, they know exactly who is from where and who is escaping what. So.
Oh, yeah. So, right, and it's not pleasant to be, you know, under, no longer under direct attack. I mean, you know, not being bombed by somebody, but still with so much uncertainty about the future.
Right.
It makes a difference. Right. Well, before you came to Ohio University, you must have had schooling elsewhere.
I did. So after the Bosnian War, so the peace came in December of 1995.
Yes, I remember.
And you know this because the
Dayton
it was signed here, yes, in Dayton, Ohio. And Dayton is just a couple of hours away from here, right?
Have you been to Dayton?
It just passed through.
Yeah.
So, but, so when it finally arrived, the economy was bad, so my parents, they applied to go elsewhere. And we got approved to come to United States in 97.
in 97.
Yes, so by that time we were the people escaping the economy.
Yes. And by then you were a teenager.
Yes, I was 13 when I came, 13 and a half when I came to Bowling Green, Kentucky. And they happened to have a university and also a good photojournalism undergrad program.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
So that's where I went to school. And I went back to Bosnia for 2 more years. I was working for a nonprofit. And then I felt that I wanted to continue my education.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard so many good things about Ohio University, and some of my teachers from Western Kentucky University have gone here. And so I applied and I came here. And I'll tell you, this place is like second home to me.
How nice. So you have friends and former teachers
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely love this place.
So you were able to stay for a while after the talk, and it's about this time of year that they usually have kind of a special journalism week, or people come.
Oh yes, I think it just happened and it just ended.
So in a way, you're sort of a part of it, you might say. There was a problem, though, and unfortunately, I've been to Scripps Auditorium other times when there were difficulties.
Oh yes, all the technical difficulties.
Yes, I don't know. I would think that it looked as if they had new things, like they had a thing up, they kept looking at a thing on the wall. Was it doing this? Was it doing that? But from the last time that I had been there, which was a number of years ago, but it was the same type of problem. And so it took about half an hour to get you really underway, didn't it?
Even longer, I think.
Even longer, boy. And with your particular program, I mean, you absolutely had to have that slide.
I know.
Yeah.
But
what can you do?
What can you do when things go wrong? The
technology
right.
Fades out. You have to do what you can. And of course, you did describe your experience during the war.
I was really thankful that you first and everyone else in the room just stayed, and they were really patient.
Yes.
So I was really quite honored and thankful for that.
Yes.
I feel like I made everyone wait for such a long time, and I felt bad.
Right. Well, I think that everyone enjoyed, I use the word in the sense of, felt that it was valuable to be able to see your program and to see the contrasting pictures, which are also quite similar in many ways.
Right, and I find that interesting as well. This is why I wanted to show, the images of the Syrian refugees, and I asked my friend to allow me and show the Bosnians, because people, not all people of course, but when you talk about refugees, they just have, the current and the instant imagination of what's going on today in the world. But it was kind of exactly the same many years ago in the past, And even before the Bosnian refugees, we had other refugees.
Yes.
So it's really important to, to show how it's different but the same.
Yes. Well, I know that we knew a man many years ago, actually before we came to Ohio University. We came in 1964. My husband was teaching at the University of Maine up in Orono, and one of his colleagues there was a man who was of German ethnicity, but his family had lived for many years, I think, in a part of Yugoslavia. You know,
Oh.
like they had moved there in about 1800 or something, the family had. But at the end of the war, because of all the hostility and the, you know, the anger at the Nazi Germans, his family had to leave. They became refugees and had to go back to, quote, their homeland, Germany, which was a place which they really didn't know because their family had lived for so long in another
Right.
country. And that's one of the things that war does, is uproot people tremendously and makes it really hard for folks. Well, I think it would be nice to see some more of your pictures. I'm sure that Matt has some more of the pictures to show. The colored ones show the people from Syria, probably,
Yes.
and the black and white people from Bosnia over 20 years ago now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of men who look like they haven't had much to eat lately,
No, this is actually at a concentration camp.
in a concentration camp in Bosnia in the 90s.
And then this is the refugee camp over in Croatia. And I wanted to show, you know, these tents, and in the next image, you know,
Tents from the
set up.
Bosnian
Right.
crisis, civil war.
And this is also in the refugee camp. Some people didn't want to sleep in tents.
Mm-hmm.
They were right in front of the fence waiting for it to open so they can get out and get on buses and go to their next destination. And these are the Bosnian refugees in school.
In the school.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And then now we get to just the Syrian refugees that I documented. This is one of the first images that I made.
Now, these pictures were mostly taken in Croatia, is that correct?
Yes, this is correct.
And recently, when did you actually take the pictures?
It was September of 2015.
2015.
Yes.
Just a few months ago, actually.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And this is, it's kind of far away from here, but this is approximately 2,000 refugees. They just got off a train and they are walking to another place 10 minutes away, and it's somebody's backyard, and they're crossing it into Hungary.
Mm-hmm. Just to get to the...
Right.
Yes. Quite a few pictures and an interesting contrast between the two. Do you have some plans to take more refugee pictures?
I do.
Mm-hmm. I believe you've actually published some of these pictures, isn't that right?
Yes, and based on the first publication is I actually wrote a personal narrative along with my images. It was the first time that I had written something along with my images,
Mm-hmm.
because the publication told me that they would run it any way I wanted, and I said, okay, if this is so, then I'm gonna use this time and space and just write why this is important to me. So I had written a piece called I'm a Refugee, and it sort of reflects on my life as a refugee in the United States,
Oh, yes.
myself as a kid during the Bosnian War, and then eventually I get to the Middle Eastern refugees over in Croatia, and why my experiences had, played such a big role on me documenting their lives. And based on that, many universities somehow got a hold of my piece, and some invited me to speak. Others wrote me an email and told me that my piece had been shared in their English classes or some other, classes that they were teaching. So I was really glad.
And I am a refugee, and that's you, Dijana, right?
Yes.
What was the name of the publication again?
This was the Tampa Bay Times in Florida.
In Florida?
Yes.
Right,
So.
quite a ways from Kentucky, your American hometown.
It is.
Yes, but it's nice that people were able to pick up. That's one of the good things about the internet, isn't it?
I know.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
People are able to make those connections and then get in touch with you and
this
so
is
forth.
Exactly, how they got in touch with me, some of the people who invited me to be a guest speaker. And I was really amazed how right after, it was published, I received these emails, and I was like, oh.
Yes. And you're still waiting to hear back from a couple of them. They may ask you to come and speak at their place.
Yes, finger crossed. Two more universities are working on, both their funding and
Right. After
dates.
all, you can't crawl over to those spots. You have to have a little help.
So yeah.
But it's nice that people are noticing and inviting you to go. How long were you in Pennsylvania?
I was there for 4 or 5 days. The conference itself was 2 days, but then I spent 2 days going and speaking in classes.
I see, yeah.
Some teachers also asked me, to come and share some of my personal experiences in their classes, and I'll tell you, it was really good. So.
Yeah, well, you're not that far away from the time. I suppose these were college classes, weren't they?
Yes.
They were. Where in Pennsylvania?
This was Allegheny College.
Allegheny College. Right. Well, we've got hills to our east called the Alleghenies. We have the Allegheny River, actually.
Really? I didn't know that.
There is an Allegheny. The Ohio River joins at Pittsburgh. The Allegheny comes in from the north, and the Monongahela comes in from the south to join to make the Ohio River, which is not very far from us here.
I just saw the Ohio River over in Indiana.
Well, and the Hocking is another one of the tributaries of the Ohio, runs into the Ohio about 30 miles from here. So it's, of course, the big northern river, the Ohio, the big northern tributary to the Mississippi. Have you done some traveling in the U.S.?
I did some. Not as much as I'd like to. I've been to Seattle, New York, then of course Nashville because it's close to Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee. I've been to North Carolina, New Hampshire, Chicago.
Well, you're well-traveled, I must say.
I've been to quite, sometimes I forget and I don't think I've been to these places, and then later I remember, oh, I've been there. Yes,
right. Well, and big cities all have certain things in common. Sometimes they can kind of blur together anyway, but if now you take San Francisco is noted for its hills, because it's built on a number of hills.
Right.
And so it's a favorite with the movie makers to show cars speeding up and down hills, which of course they aren't supposed to do. But if it's a detective chase or something like that in the movie, then it makes it an exciting locale. I guess. But yeah, I've lived in Washington, D.C., as I think I mentioned when we went to the roundabout. That Washington, D.C. roundabouts are even more
Right.
so.
And I've been to Washington, D.C. as well. I've actually had my first solo exhibition at the U.S. Congress.
Oh, really? Wonderful.
Yes.
When was that?
This was 2012 or 2011.
2011, 2012?
One of the years, I forget now. But I had documented the aftermath of the Bosnian War. I spent some time doing that. And so I was invited to show my images there. And that's when I was in Washington, D.C. But I was also there for Obama's inauguration, the first one. Yes.
My goodness. How did you happen to get there then?
Oh, this was such a wonderful experience. I was in my undergrad, and one of our friends, our classmates, his parents live in Washington. So about 25 of us stayed in his house.
Sleeping bags everywhere.
Yes. This was so fun. And then we went, and I remember it was so cold.
Oh,
And
yeah.
That
January 20th, it's likely to be cold.
Let me tell you, that day and all these days when I've seen the Syrian refugees were the 2 times in my life that I've never seen so many people or as many people in my life.
Oh, yes. Well, the mall must have been full of onlookers, or actually, don't they? Yeah, it was on the west side of the Capitol. I'm pretty sure. You know, my husband and I were in Washington, D.C. a long time ago. We were there in 1961. And I had a little boy, a toddler, who was about 18 months old at the time, and a brand new baby. My son David, who lives here in Athens still, was just a brand new baby on January 20th, 1961, when John F. Kennedy was inaugurated president. And it was on the east side of the Capitol. And we were very close. We were living, we could see one of the congressional office buildings out our front yard. And we were only a block from the Library of Congress because my husband was doing research there and so on. So he bundled up. It was a really cold and snowy day, but he bundled up and went over. So he actually heard this famous speech that President Kennedy gave at his inauguration in 1961 because we were so close by.
Oh, nice. I actually think that I had met your husband.
Yes, quite likely. Yeah, he likes to talk to people, and
Yes, because my friend and I, we were talking about the former Yugoslavia, and he joined us in conversation. And so they stayed talking for a really long time. And I took a picture of him, so I have to show you and make sure if this was him.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
well, there's a connection we didn't even know about, isn't it? Right. Well, he was quite taken by the Yugoslav Civil War, in part because his specialty is the Spanish Civil War. And it's exactly 80 years ago this year that the Spanish Civil War began. It was sort of a preliminary to World War II, and the Spaniards were fighting each other, but there was a lot of foreign intervention on both sides. And so it was, like I say, a sort of a run-up to the Second World War, and we were both very interested in it. And in fact, I remember we talked about the Spanish Civil War the first night we met, which was early in 1954.
that must have been a really nice day.
Right. So And then since he's been working on it for so long, and we've spent some time in Spain and so forth, and I've helped him with some of his research, and yeah, it's amazing to think that it's 80 years ago now that the Spanish Civil War began, which was a terrible, a terrible event, and with all the foreign intervention, which made a difference too, and there was some of that in the Yugoslav situation, I guess, but mostly it was the people who were trying to hold on to, I guess the Serbs thought they were going to hold on to Yugoslavia somehow through Bosnia, but the Slovenes had already left and the Croats had already left, and by the spring of 1992,
right,
when the war itself around Bosnia was
yes, in Bosnia in 1992, but then the Croatia was in 1991. So
yeah, well, it was one of those things. The first President George Bush was president at that time, and when the war began in 91, and they decided to stay out, but President Clinton was more interested.
Right, and this is why Bosnians love him.
Yes, and what was his name? Robert. His name is escaping me, but there was an American statesman who's spent a lot of time sort of mediating and trying to mediate the Dayton Accords and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so America got quite involved at that point. Yes, yeah. Well, war is pretty bad, that's for sure. I don't know. What can one say?
Well, and I can say for my country, I of course cannot speak for the other ones, but even when the peace arrived, and speaking of the Dayton Accords, it was sort of designed for, it seems like, an immediate, peace, but what it eventually did, it just separated and segregated the country. So now you have Bosnia, and Bosnia is sort of divided in pieces itself, and they kind of function like countries themselves, but it shouldn't be like that, and many people are not happy about that. But then again, you can't change it overnight.
Right.
But
well, of course, the United States is a nation of refugees in a sense. I mean, it really began that way with people who were unhappy where they were, and thought there might be something better to cross the Atlantic at the beginning, and the colonization effort that was made, and the whole experience of fighting with the Indians and the western frontier gradually moving to the west. And of course Ohio itself is part of the Northwest Territory, which was set up in 1787, and we even have that quote on the recently demolished College Gate, which is going to be rebuilt to be more disability friendly. They're going to be putting a ramp there, and they say it'll take a while to build that up.
Oh, wow.
But probably it'll be, I imagine it'll be done within a year anyway, maybe even by the end of summer, who knows. But that's a quotation from the Northwest Ordinance, and the fact there is Ohio University is a part of the Northwest Ordinance. religion, morality, and knowledge. You know, that was a sentence that was something that was emphasized by the Northwest Ordinance, and they even set up a way of providing money to build a university. And Ohio University was that first university in the Northwest Territory. Shortly after Ohio became a state in 1803. We date from 1804. Even though there weren't many students until much, much later, and now we seem to be really overwhelmed and running with students.
I know.
I guess there are even more students than there were in your day when you were a graduate student a couple of years ago.
Probably. But it's good to have, students from
Yes.
all over the world.
Yes, we have a lot of students. We have International Week coming up soon, you know.
Yes.
And so they have flags from 100 and some countries safely stored away someplace, which...
Yes, and I remember my last year here, there was a Bosnian flag on the Court Street.
Was there?
Yes, and I was so happy. I didn't know they were going to put it up.
Uh-huh.
And I was walking and I was like, wow.
That looks familiar, huh?
Yes, I looked at it and I at first didn't react, and I was like, wow, this is Bosnian flag. So that was a really nice gesture.
Yes, they do that, and of course they had longer terms when you were here, I believe. I mean,
No, I think
were they already on the
Yes.
ending in the first week or two of April? Because May is totally gone now.
really.
Yeah, May.
Oh, I didn't know that.
May is totally gone. They start in about the 20th of August and finish the first semester by Christmas. And then start
Okay.
the second semester like mid-January, and it runs
This
to
is
it just barely into April.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is about right. Maybe mine ended just a few days at the beginning of May,
Mm-hmm.
or the last day in April. I can't remember, but yes,
Right.
I think this is about right.
International Week used to be the first week in May, and it was toward the end of the school year, but now May is all gone.
Wow.
Right.
I did not know.
Well, that's one of the changes, that comes around. Does your family still live in Bowling Green, Kentucky?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I'm getting ready to visit them, and well, from here I'm going to New York, and then from New York I'll be going to Kentucky. So
Oh, well, that'll be nice. And you say, do your brothers also live over there?
yes, I have two brothers.
Uh-huh. So you'll have a chance to have a family reunion.
I know.
That'll be good. Well, what else have you found of interest in your life besides photojournalism, what you're doing now? What are some of your other interests?
Well, there are a few of them. I recently rediscovered, and this is all mainly because I documented the Syrian refugees, but I minored in creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never used my writings to support my images. I was always encouraged to do it, but I always ignored it. But then I saw the importance of it and how much more powerful that is when you put the two together. So I've been, focusing also on writing a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I love hiking. I've kind of discovered hiking 4 years ago.
Hiking is
So-
very nice around here.
Yes, I hike over on the ridges.
Uh-huh.
But in Bosnia we have hills and mountains, so I like going uphill. And yeah.
Well, it gets you close to nature, too.
Right.
I can remember, you talk about hiking on the ridges, and my hiking days are pretty much over, but I remember when my boys were young, and they were members of Cub Scouts, I guess it was, and we went out to Dowell Lake with a Cub Scout pack of 8 or 9 boys, you know, little boys about 8 years old, 9 years old, and you know, you tell them at the foot of the trail, now don't go too fast, just walk slowly so you can see some birds and some flowers and some bushes and some trees and so forth. And so, well, the other mothers and I got to the foot of the trail, and the boys took off like a flash. They rushed right up to the very top of the hill. Meanwhile, the moms are kind of struggling along in the back. They were up at the top long before we were. You know, I don't think they saw a single bird because the birds all flew away. But that's part of the boys will be boys sort of thing, I guess. Maybe
Right.
girls do that too, but I don't recall it. And usually more if you tell them walk slowly and look for the birds, they're more likely to do that than the boys are, probably. Well, that's just one of those things. I remember asking you your birth date, and you said it was in September.
Yes, September 5th of 1983.
1983. So we looked in my book, which is called Remember the Ladies, which gives birth dates and death dates of famous women. So I said, well, you never can tell. This is like smorgasbord. It's, you never know what it might be. So we looked up September 5th, and it was kind of interesting and definitely different here. Sarah Edmonds of Texas, who died in 1898. And little is known of her except that she ran away from Texas, went to Michigan, and she passed in Michigan as a male. So she went into the American Civil War as a soldier. And people didn't know, you know, the guys never knew that she was not really a man.
What a powerful woman.
Yes. Well, they have a few stories like that in here. I remember there was another woman who was, I think it was Anne Bonny, who was a pirate, actually. You know, so they've got some people who did something different, for sure. So,
well, I didn't, when I was documenting the Syrian refugees, I didn't have to dress as a man, but I'll tell you, I arrived there when they weren't allowing any media to get in. They had just decided to say no.
No media, no
No
photojournalists either.
Oh, but I walked in. I was inside of me. I knew I was gonna get in, and I was a bit angry that they, you know, wouldn't allow me. So I just picked up my camera and I walked right in. No one asked me a thing.
Perhaps they thought you were just someone interested in things, looking around. And you know, I had someone on my program here last fall, someone that I've known for a long time. Well, actually, I've known her parents, but she went to Syria in, I think it was 2008. It was either 2008 or 2009. Anyway, it was before the war. And she took many, many beautiful pictures of Syria.
Yeah.
And she was at Palmyra, you know, where a lot, I guess they're trying to take Palmyra back one side's trying to take Palmyra back, but the ISIL people have been there and destroyed a number of the ancient ruins and so forth. But she was able to see all that
Oh, okay.
back in the peaceful days in Syria. So,
That's good.
yeah, it's because places can change a lot, for sure, when that happens.
Oh, yeah. Some of the parts in Syria are completely destroyed.
Hmm.
So,
So how long were you actually, you were in Croatia when you took these pictures though, right?
yes, I went there twice, and it was a couple of weeks.
Uh-huh, you were there a couple of weeks.
Maybe a little bit longer than that, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Just last September. Right.
It was the end of September, I think,
Hmm.
when I went.
Well, I think we've seen most of your pictures, probably all of your pictures, and we're just about to the end of our time. What is this picture?
This is a picture that to me symbolizes peace in Bosnia. It is of a town called Gorazde.
Garajda?
It's just taken from my friend's balcony, and I was waiting for one of the pigeons to do something to sort of represent, what.
And he did. He flew
And
very
he
nicely. And that's a nice way to end our time together, Dijana.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I've enjoyed very much having you today, Dijana Muminovic.
Muminovic, you got it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And best of luck on your next adventures.
Thank you.
This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday.